"You may now kiss the bride," the officiant announced, and the room erupted in applause. The groom leaned in, sealing their vows with a kiss that felt like the perfect beginning of forever. To everyone in attendance, it was a wedding straight out of a fairy tale, two people deeply in love, promising to stand by each other no matter what. But not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Just hours before, the bride had been quiet, her smile radiant, but her eyes betraying something deeper, something she hadn't shared with anyone. Her laughter filled the air as they danced their first dance, and yet there was a fleeting look in her eyes that hinted at a storm brewing beneath the surface. As the night went on, the groom was too caught up in the joy of the day to notice anything amiss. Guests clinked glasses, laughter echoed through the hall, and every detail seemed flawless. But somewhere in the crowd, the bride was making a decision that would change everything. Without a word, she vanished into the night, leaving behind only questions and a groom whose perfect day was about to turn into a heartbreaking mystery. Why did she leave? What was she hiding? And what truth could be so powerful that it made her run away from the happiest day of her life? The groom stood near the edge of the dance floor, laughing with friends as the music played softly in the background. The atmosphere was alive with joy, clinking glasses, laughter and smiles filled the room. But amidst the celebration, he couldn't help but notice one thing. The bride was nowhere to be seen. At first, he brushed it off. Maybe she was freshening up or speaking with family. But as the minutes ticked by, a strange unease began to settle in his chest. He scanned the room again, his smile fading. "Have you seen her?" he asked a bridesmaid standing nearby. She shook her head. "Not for a while. I thought she was with you." The groom's brow furrowed as he moved through the crowd, asking one guest after another, "Did you see where she went? Was she feeling okay?" Each response was the same, a polite shrug or a confused shake of the head. Nobody seemed to know. He headed toward the bridal suite, his steps quickening as his concern grew. Knocking on the door, he called out, "Are you in there?" There was no response. When he opened the door, the room was empty. Her veil lay neatly folded on the chair, but the bride was gone. The unease turned into a knot of worry as he moved through the venue, checking every corner, every room, asking the staff if they'd seen her. "She stepped outside earlier," one waiter offered hesitantly. "But I didn't see her come back." Outside, the cool night air hit him as he searched the garden and the parking lot, his heart racing. Her car was still there, but she wasn't. Every possibility raced through his mind. Had something happened to her? Had she gotten cold feet? Or was there something else entirely that he didn't know about? Back inside, the mood of the reception began to shift. Guests whispered among themselves, their smiles fading as they noticed the groom's absence and the bride's mysterious disappearance. The joyful atmosphere was now tinged with confusion and concern. The groom stood still for a moment, gripping the edge of a table as he tried to steady his thoughts. This wasn't like her. She wouldn't just disappear without saying anything. Would she? He clenched his jaw, his mind made up. "I'll find her. Whatever's going on, I need to know the truth." Little did he know, the truth he was about to uncover would change everything. The groom's search led him back to the bridal suite. He pushed the door open, his heart pounding, hoping to find some sign of where she had gone. The room was eerily quiet, untouched, as if she had simply disappeared into thin air. But then, something caught his eye. On the vanity table, beside the scattered makeup and flowers, was an envelope. His name was written on it in her familiar handwriting, the letters soft and deliberate, like she had taken her time to write it. His throat tightened as he picked it up, his fingers trembling slightly. The envelope was sealed, the weight of it heavy with questions he wasn't sure he was ready to face. He stared at it for a moment, debating whether to open it right away. Why would she leave me a letter, he thought, his mind racing. Was this planned? Nearby he noticed her veil, neatly folded on the chair. Next to it was a small clutch, empty, as if she had carefully removed its contents before leaving. Everything in the room seemed deliberate, as though she had prepared for this moment in advance. The realization hit him like a wave. She didn't leave by accident. She planned this. The groom sank onto the edge of the bed, the letter still in his hands. His mind raced through the possibilities. Was she scared? Did she change her mind about marrying me? Or was there something I didn't know about her, something she couldn't tell me in person? He clutched the letter tightly, resisting the urge to tear it open. Instead, he placed it in his jacket pocket, his jaw tightening. He wasn't ready to read it, not yet. He needed to keep searching, to understand why she had left without a word. As he stood, his eyes scanned the room one last time, searching for anything else she might have left behind. Then, he noticed the faintest trace of a scent, her favorite perfume, lingering in the air. It was a small reminder of her presence, and it fueled his determination to find her. She left clues for me, he thought. But why? What is she trying to tell me? With the unopened letter in his pocket and the veil in his mind as a haunting image, the groom left the room. His worry now mixed with a growing sense of urgency. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he was certain of one thing. Whatever had made her leave, he needed to find her, and the truth, before it was too late. The groom stepped outside into the cool night air, his mind swirling with unanswered questions. The unopened letter burned in his pocket, a silent reminder of the bride's absence. His heart raced as he scanned the venue grounds, looking for any sign of her. Footprints on the pathway, a shadow in the garden, anything that could give him a clue. "Did you see her?" he asked a security guard near the gate, his voice edged with urgency. The guard scratched his head, thinking, "I saw her earlier, sir. She walked toward the parking lot, but she didn't leave in a car. Looked like she was in a hurry, though." The groom clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. Why would she leave like this, he thought, his worry deepening. He turned back toward the venue, retracing her steps through the hallways and common areas. In the lounge near the exit, he noticed something, a crumpled receipt on the floor just beneath one of the chairs. Picking it up, he scanned it quickly. It was from a nearby cafe, time-stamped just 30 minutes ago. His chest tightened. Did she go there? Is she trying to send me a message? Determined to follow the lead, he hurried to his car, driving toward the cafe with a mix of hope and dread. The streets were quiet, the soft hum of the engine the only sound, as his mind replayed every moment from earlier that evening. Had there been signs he missed? Was she nervous during the ceremony? Did her smile hide something deeper? When he reached the cafe, it was nearly empty, save for a barista cleaning the counter. The groom approached her, holding up the receipt. "Excuse me," he said, his voice firm but strained. "Did you see someone tonight? A woman wearing a wedding dress or something white?" The barista paused, her eyes narrowing as she thought. "Yeah," she said finally. "I remember her. She came in not long ago, ordered a tea to go. She seemed distracted, nervous maybe." "Did she say anything? Did she mention where she was going?" he pressed. The barista shook her head. "No, she didn't stay long, but she left this on the table." She reached under the counter and handed him a folded napkin. His name was written on it in the same delicate handwriting as the letter in his pocket. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside, there was a short message. "I need time to think. Please don't follow me." His heart sank as he read the words. They weren't just a note. They were a plea, a barrier she was putting between them. But why? Back in the car, the groom gripped the steering wheel tightly, his emotions a whirlwind of worry, frustration, and confusion. Why didn't she talk to me? Why did she feel like she had to run? He pulled over to the side of the road, closing his eyes for a moment to steady himself. He couldn't let his emotions cloud his judgment. If she had left clues, it meant she wanted him to understand something, even if she wasn't ready to say it outright. Looking at the napkin again, he noticed a faint smudge in the corner, almost like an address partially wiped away. He squinted, making out part of it. "It's something. I just need to figure out where it leads." Determined not to give up, He started the car again, his thoughts racing. Every clue brought him closer, but it also deepened the mystery. The woman he thought he knew better than anyone was slipping further away, and with every passing moment the stakes felt higher. "I'll find you," he thought, gripping the wheel tighter, "and when I do, I'll finally understand why you left." The groom drove through the quiet streets, his mind replaying the events of the day. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as flashes of her smile, her laughter, and her warmth kept crossing his mind. But now, those happy memories were clouded with questions. Did I miss something? Was she trying to tell me all along? As he pieced together the clues, his thoughts drifted to moments he had brushed aside. There was the time, just a week before the wedding, when she seemed distracted during dinner. He had chalked it up to nerves, laughing it off as he reassured her that everything would be perfect. But now, in hindsight, he wondered if there had been more to her silence. Another memory surfaced. 2 days before the wedding, she had lingered in the garden, staring at the horizon with a distant look in her eyes. He had walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, whispering, "What's on your mind?" She had smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Nothing," she had said softly. "Just thinking about everything." Her words echoed in his mind now, heavy with a weight he hadn't noticed before. He had let it go, believing her when she said everything was fine. Why didn't I ask her more, he thought, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. The car came to a halt at the address he had managed to decipher from the napkin. It was a small park, quiet and dimly lit under the pale glow of the streetlights. He stepped out of the car, scanning the area, hoping for any sign of her. The cool night air bit at his skin as he walked along the path, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. As he wandered, his mind pulled up another moment, a fleeting hesitation during the ceremony. When it was time to exchange vows, her voice had faltered for a split second. He had thought it was nerves, but now he wasn't so sure. The way she had looked at him, almost like she was searching for something, some kind of reassurance, had stuck with him. At the time, he had brushed it off, but now it felt like a piece of a puzzle he didn't yet understand. Near a bench, he noticed something, a scarf. It was hers, a soft white fabric he had seen her wear before. Picking it up, he felt his chest tighten. She was here. He sat down on the bench, clutching the scarf in his hands, his thoughts racing. He could almost see her sitting there, wrestling with something too heavy to carry. But what was it? What was she so afraid of that she felt she couldn't tell him? As he sat in the quiet park, the memories continued to surface. Small moments he hadn't paid attention to, now painted with a deeper meaning. The way she had been quieter than usual during the rehearsal dinner, her long pauses before answering questions about the future, the way her hand trembled ever so slightly when he slid the ring onto her finger. She's been holding something back, he thought, something she couldn't say out loud. The groom stood, the scarf still in his hand, and took a deep breath. He was getting closer, but the full truth remained just out of reach. Each clue felt like a breadcrumb leading him down a path he wasn't sure he wanted to follow. But he couldn't stop now. He had to find her, to understand what had made her leave, even if it meant confronting a truth he wasn't ready to hear. As he walked back to his car, the suspense lingered in the air. The bride's hesitation, the fragments of her unease, all pointed to a story he had yet to uncover, a story that would change everything. The groom's footsteps echoed through the dim hallway of an old quiet inn on the outskirts of town. The scarf in his hand felt heavier with each step, as if it carried the weight of the questions swirling in his mind. He had followed the clues here, but he still wasn't ready for what he might find. As he approached the last door at the end of the hall, his heart pounded in his chest. He raised his hand and knocked softly. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the sound of soft footsteps on the other side. The door opened slightly, and there she was, his bride. Her face pale, and her eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and sorrow. She hesitated before opening the door wider, stepping aside to let him in. The room was small and simple, a stark contrast to the grandeur of their wedding venue. A single suitcase sat in the corner, partially packed. She stood near the window, her arms crossed as if trying to shield herself from what was coming. The groom took a step forward, his voice low and filled with emotion. "Why?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "Why did you leave?" She looked at him, her lips trembling as she struggled to find the words. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said softly. I couldn't do it. Not without telling you the truth." His brows furrowed in confusion. The truth about what? She turned away, staring out the window into the darkness. "There are things about me, things I've never told you," she began, her voice shaking. "I wanted to. I tried. But I was scared. Scared you'd look at me differently. Scared you'd walk away." He stepped closer, his tone both gentle and firm. "You know I love you. Nothing could change that. Whatever it is, just tell me." She took a deep breath, her hands gripping the windowsill. "I've spent my life running," she said, her words slow and deliberate. "From my past, from the person I used to be. I thought if I left it all behind I could start over. And when I met you it felt like I finally had a chance. But I was wrong." The groom's chest tightened. "What are you running from?" he asked quietly. She turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "When I was younger, I made mistakes. Big ones. I trusted the wrong people, got involved in things I shouldn't have. It was messy, dangerous. And even though I've tried to leave it behind, it still haunts me." He stared at her, his mind reeling. The woman he thought he knew, the one he loved with every part of himself, had a past he had never imagined. He struggled to process her words, to reconcile the image of the radiant bride he had watched walk down the aisle with the woman standing before him now, burdened by secrets she had carried alone. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why didn't you trust me?" "I wanted to," she said, her voice filled with anguish. "But every time I tried, I saw how happy you were, how perfect everything seemed. I didn't want to ruin that. I didn't want you to see me as broken." He shook his head, his emotions a whirlwind of shock, sadness, and anger, not at her, but at the pain she had endured alone. "You're not broken," he said firmly, his voice steadying. "And you never had to carry this alone. I would have stood by you. I still will." She looked at him, her tears falling freely now. "How can you say that? How can you still want to be with me after everything I've told you?" "Because I love you," he said without hesitation. "And love isn't just about the good parts. It's about the hard parts too. The things that scare us, the things we think will drive people away. I'm not going anywhere. Not now, not ever." Her breath hitched and she covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed by his words. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of her secrets begin to lift. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "We'll face this together," he said softly. "Whatever it is, whatever comes next, we'll figure it out." She nodded, a glimmer of hope breaking through the tears. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. "You deserve everything," he replied, pulling her into a gentle embrace. As they stood there, holding each other in the quiet of the room, the groom's mind was still spinning. He didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to let her face this alone. No matter how complicated her past was, no matter how uncertain the future seemed, his love for her was stronger than his fear. And as the first light of dawn began to creep through the window, he made a silent promise to himself. Whatever truth she had shared, it wouldn't be the end of their story. It would be the beginning of a new one. The room was still, the air heavy with unspoken emotions as the bride sat on the edge of the bed, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. The groom pulled a chair closer and sat across from her, his eyes locked onto hers, silently urging her to speak. He could see the weight she carried, the struggle in her every breath, and he knew this was a moment she had spent years dreading. "I never wanted it to come to this," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I didn't know how to move forward without telling you everything." He nodded, his throat tight. "I'm here. Just tell me," he said gently, though his own heart was racing with anticipation and fear. She looked down at her trembling hands, her voice shaking as she continued. I've spent so much of my life pretending to be someone I'm not, hiding parts of myself because I was scared that if people really knew me, they'd leave. Why would anyone leave? He asked softly, his brows furrowing. You're incredible. She shook her head, a bitter smile crossing her lips. You don't understand. My past, it's not what you think. Before I met you, my life was messy. I made mistakes, trusted the wrong people, and paid the price for it. And even though I've tried to leave it all behind, I can't seem to escape it. He leaned forward, his voice steady but filled with emotion. You think I'd judge you for that? After everything we've been through together? Her eyes filled with tears as she looked up at him, her vulnerability laid bare. It's not just about judgment, she said. It's about you seeing me differently. When you look at me, I want you to see the person I've become, not the person I used to be. But how could I expect that when I couldn't even forgive myself? Her words hit him like a punch to the chest. He had always seen her as confident, radiant and strong, but now he realized how much pain she had hidden beneath the surface. You've been carrying this alone, he said quietly, the realization breaking his heart. All this time, you didn't think you could tell me. She wiped at her tears, nodding. I didn't want to ruin everything we had. You made me feel safe, like I could finally have a fresh start. But as the wedding got closer, I couldn't shake the fear that if you knew, you'd regret choosing me. He sat back, his mind swirling with emotions, confusion, sadness, even a twinge of anger, though not at her. It was anger at the world for making her feel this way, for burdening her with so much pain that she couldn't see how deeply he loved her. Do you really think so little of me? He asked, his voice breaking slightly. That I'd turn my back on you because of your past? She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. I don't think little of you, she said softly. I just didn't think I was enough for you. The groom reached out, taking her hands in his. You are enough, he said firmly, his voice filled with conviction. You've always been enough. I don't care about the mistakes you've made or the things you've been through. All I care about is the person sitting in front of me right now. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked at him, her walls slowly crumbling. I've spent so long being afraid, she admitted. Afraid of being seen, of being known. But you've always seen me, haven't you? I have, he said softly, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. And I always will. You don't have to hide anymore. Not from me. She let out a shaky breath, the weight of her fears beginning to lift. I'm sorry I ran, she said. I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was hurt you. He shook his head, his expression gentle. You don't have to apologize, he said. I just want to move forward, together, no more running, no more hiding. Her lips trembled as a small, hesitant smile broke through. You mean that? I mean it, he said, his voice steady. Whatever it is, whatever comes next, we'll face it together. I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe him. As she leaned into his embrace, the tears finally stopped, replaced by a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. The groom held her tightly, his own heart heavy but resolute. He didn't have all the answers, and he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw something worth fighting for, someone worth standing by no matter what. And in that moment, he made a silent vow, to love her not in spite of her struggles, but because of them. Because they had shaped the woman he had fallen in love with, the woman he would choose again and again, no matter what. The room was quiet now, the tension replaced by a fragile calm as the groom sat beside the bride on the edge of the bed. Her confession still lingered in the air, heavy and raw, but his mind was no longer racing. Instead, he found himself thinking about all the moments that had brought them here, their laughter, their late-night talks, the way her smile had always felt like home. He glanced at her, sitting with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her head bowed. She looked so small, so unsure of herself, and it broke something inside him. She had carried this pain, this fear, all on her own, believing it would drive him away. But as he looked at her now, all he could feel was love, overwhelming and unshakable. "I've been thinking," he said softly, breaking the silence. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and searching. "About what?" "About us," he said, his voice steady. "About everything you told me tonight, and I realized something." Her breath caught, her fingers tightening around each other. "What?" He turned to face her fully, his expression resolute. "I realize that none of it changes how I feel about you. Not a single thing." Tears welled up in her eyes as she shook her head. "How can you say that? After everything I told you, after the way I ran, how can you still want to be with me?" "Because I love you," he said simply, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "And love isn't about perfection or pretending the past doesn't exist. It's about standing by someone, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." She looked away, her tears spilling over. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I thought I'd ruin everything, that you'd see me differently." He reached out, gently placing his hand over hers. "I do see you differently," he said, his tone soft but firm. "Not because of your past, but because of your strength. You've been through so much, and you're still here. That's the woman I fell in love with. That's the woman I want to spend my life with." Her lip quivered, and she let out a shaky breath. "You don't know how much that means to me," she said, her voice breaking. "I've never had anyone stand by me like this. I didn't think it was possible." "Well, now you do," he said, squeezing her hand gently, "and I'm not going anywhere." For a long moment they sat in silence, their hands intertwined. The air between them felt different now, lighter, freer, as if the weight of her fears had finally lifted. She turned to him, a hesitant smile breaking through her tears. "Do you really mean it?" she asked. "That we can get through this?" He smiled back, his own eyes glistening with emotion. "I've never been more sure of anything," he said. "Whatever we have to face, we'll face it together." Her tears came again, but this time they were tears of relief, of hope. She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest as he wrapped his arms around her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe, truly, deeply safe. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me." "Never," he said softly, his voice full of promise. "We're a team, remember? No matter what." As they sat there, holding each other, it felt like the beginning of something new. Their bond, once tested by fear and doubt, now felt stronger than ever. They weren't perfect, and the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they had something far more important: each other. And in that moment, as they promised to face the future together, they both knew that their love was worth every challenge. Because it wasn't just about where they'd been, it was about where they were going, hand in hand, ready to take on the world as one. The grand doors of the wedding hall creaked open, drawing every pair of eyes in the room toward the entrance. The hum of quiet murmurs and confusion that had filled the air moments before fell silent as the bride and groom stepped inside, hand in hand. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and a wave of emotion swept over the room. The bride's face was radiant, her earlier tears replaced by a soft, determined smile. Her hand was tightly clasped in the groom's, his steady presence beside her speaking volumes. Together they walked toward the altar, their steps slow but purposeful, their love unshakable despite everything that had unfolded. The guests, who had spent the last hour speculating about what had happened, now watched in awe. Whispers of confusion quickly turned into murmurs of admiration. Whatever had happened, it was clear that the bond between the couple had only grown stronger. When they reached the front of the room, the groom turned to face the crowd, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "I know tonight hasn't gone the way anyone expected," he began, his eyes scanning the faces of their friends and family. "But I want you all to know something. Love isn't about perfection. It's about standing together, even when things are hard. And tonight, we've faced something hard, but we've also found something stronger." The bride's eyes glistened with tears as she squeezed his hand. He turned to her, his expression softening. "I want to say my vows again," he said, his voice quiet but firm, because now they mean more than ever. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Me too. The room fell silent as the groom began. I promise to love you, not just for who you are, but for everything you've been through and everything you'll become. I promise to stand by you, to fight for us, and to face every challenge together, because no matter what happens, you are my home. The bride let out a shaky breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. And I promise to trust you, to let you see all of me, the good and the bad. I promise to believe in us, even when it's hard, and to always remember that love is stronger than fear. You've shown me what it means to be truly loved, and for that, I'll always be grateful. Tears filled the eyes of many guests as they listened to the couple's heartfelt vows. What had begun as a night of confusion and unanswered questions had transformed into a moment of profound connection and admiration. The strength of their love, their willingness to fight for each other, left everyone in awe. As the officiant declared them husband and wife once again, the room erupted into applause, this time louder and more heartfelt than before. The guests rose to their feet, clapping and cheering as the couple sealed their vows with a kiss. It wasn't just a kiss of celebration, it was a declaration of resilience, of a love that had been tested and emerged stronger. As they turned to face the crowd, the bride and groom were met with smiles, tears, and a renewed sense of joy. Whatever challenges had brought them to this moment, they had proven that their love was worth it. And in that moment, they weren't just a bride and groom, they were a symbol of hope, of love that could weather any storm. The atmosphere shifted entirely, the confusion and whispers replaced by admiration and happiness. As the couple moved through the crowd, greeting their guests with genuine smiles, it was clear that this wedding wasn't just about a ceremony, it was about a journey, one that had brought everyone closer, and one that would inspire all who witnessed it. The night was quiet now, the echoes of laughter and celebration fading as the final guests bid their farewells. The bride and groom stood on the balcony of the venue, the soft glow of the moonlight casting a serene light over them. They were alone at last, a moment of peace after a day filled with emotions they hadn't anticipated. The groom leaned against the railing, looking out at the stars. His hand reached for hers, their fingers interlocking naturally, as if to anchor them both. He glanced at her, his expression thoughtful but calm. Today taught me something I never really understood before, he began, his voice steady but full of emotion. She turned to him, her gaze gentle. What's that? She asked softly. That love isn't just about the easy moments, he said. It's not just about laughter and happiness and everything going perfectly. It's about forgiveness. It's about standing by someone even when things get hard, especially when they get hard. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude, of love. I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you enough for not giving up on me, she said, her voice trembling. For seeing me, not just the good parts, but all of me, and still choosing to stay. He smiled, his hand tightening around hers. You don't have to thank me, he said. That's what love is. It's not about ignoring the hard truths, it's about facing them together. And you've shown me what it means to truly love someone, to let go of expectations and just be there. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. I've spent so long being afraid of what people would think if they knew everything about me, she admitted. But with you, I finally feel like I can let that go, like I don't have to hide anymore. You don't, he said, his voice firm but kind. Not from me, and not from anyone. You're stronger than you know, and your past doesn't define you. What matters is who you are now, and who we'll be together. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the day lifting as they held each other. The groom's thoughts drifted back to everything that had happened, her fear, her confession, the moments of doubt he had felt. But as he looked at her now, he realized those struggles had only made their love stronger. When I stood at that altar today, "I thought I knew what love was," he said, breaking the silence, "but now I see it's so much more. Love is messy. It's complicated. But it's also the most powerful thing in the world. It's what brought us back to each other. And it's what will keep us together, no matter what comes next." The bride lifted her head, her eyes shining with hope. "You really believe that?" she asked. "I do," he said, a smile tugging at his lips. "And I promise you this. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. No more secrets, no more running, just us, building a future we can be proud of." She nodded, her heart full. "I promise too," she said softly, "to trust you, to let you in, and to believe in us." As they shared a quiet, heartfelt kiss, the world seemed to fall away, leaving only their love and the promises they had made. The bride's heart swelled with gratitude for the man who had not only stood by her, but had shown her the true meaning of love and forgiveness. The groom, too, felt a profound sense of peace. He had always believed in love, but now he understood its depth, the courage it required, the patience it demanded, and the strength it gave. As the scene faded, the final message of their story became clear. Love isn't perfect, but it's powerful. It's not about avoiding mistakes or hiding from the truth. It's about choosing each other, again and again, through every challenge and every triumph. Together, they stood on the threshold of a new chapter, their bond unshaken, their hearts full, and their future bright. It wasn't the perfect wedding they had planned, but it was the beginning of a love story far greater than either of them could have imagined. If this heartfelt story touched your soul and reminded you of the power of love, forgiveness, and resilience, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who could use a little inspiration today. We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us, what does true love mean to you? Have you ever experienced a moment where forgiveness strengthened your bond with someone? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more emotional and inspiring stories that celebrate love, hope, and the beauty of second chances. Thank you for watching.